talk a little bit about your upbringing.
Well, grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where by birthright I was made into a Steelers fan back in the 1970s, in the heyday of that franchise. And of course, Seth and I know each other for the audience and for AJ. Seth and I know each other from a project we worked on at the NFL Network, where one of my marquee stories for the project we were working on was about the Immaculate Reception football, right? And so it was a hometown story for me, but one that was rooted in that upbringing in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where in the 1970s the steel industry had collapsed and things didn't look so great for the Rust Belt, but the Pittsburgh Steelers were forged during that hard time, the dynasty that would ultimately win 6 Lombardi trophies. So if you grew up there, it was hard not to be a fan of the Steelers. And even though I haven't lived in Pittsburgh for a long, long time, that fandom remains, and certainly was a great thing to have as an undercurrent for a lot of the work I do with as a freelancer, the NFL and the NFL Network, which again is where Seth and I met over a decade ago, in fact. But yep, grew up in Pittsburgh.
Hold on, real quick, hold on.
Yeah.
Don't bury the lead on the Immaculate Reception piece. That piece won the Sports Emmy for short feature of the year, the National Sports Emmy. So let's just, let's bow down to Jim on that one. While we were a team, and there it is, there's a pice of hardware. But while we were a team,
you were saying something about an oh.
Hey, while we were a team, there was
I keep them handy for any podcasts that have a video element to it.
We were a little envious. Of Jim winning the Emmy that year on the Immaculate Reception piece. And now I know that story meant a lot more to you than met the eye. I didn't know you were actually from Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I don't know if you want the backstory on that, but I'm happy to give it if you like. But needless to say, the project we were working on was, it was a great team effort, and we were set up for success, I think, right? Brian Lockhart bringing a group of people together with our supervising producers, Kevin Shaw and Aaron Cohen, who great filmmakers in their own rights, and then the group of us producer directors producing stories every 3, 4, 5 weeks throughout a season. Phil Guidry, a writer and story editor extraordinaire. So it was what a great environment. Sometimes you don't realize when you were in the midst of the good stuff until it's a few years later, and you look back and you think, wow, that was a great moment in time. I was super fortunate that that story came along and that it had all the right elements.
Absolutely. We pushed each other.
Yeah,
we pushed each other, but then Jim kind of set the gold standard there, that the actual gold standard. So, we were happy for him.
Hey, Jim, I'm gonna tell you this.
Appreciate it.
I stayed quiet because I'm a Ravens fan. I'm ready to move on from the Pittsburgh Steelers talk. I just got to put that out there. I'm just listening, but I had to put that out there. I am not a fan of the Steelers, but I'm a fan of your work. So I have a question for you. How did you transition from Pittsburgh to the Air Force Academy and not choose like a traditional university, say UPenn or Penn State or one of those options?
Yeah, probably had a lot to do with my upbringing. I didn't come from a military family, but in the 80s, so many, it's the Reagan years, and so much of what we saw coming out of Hollywood was very much patriotic fare. Movies like Red Dawn and Top Gun, Iron Eagle. I mean, we could go on and on. And I also had, weirdly enough, because of that era, had this interest in all things Russia and the Soviet Union. They seemed like this, this evil empire on the other side of the world, and we need you to step forward and do the right thing for the country, the heroic thing. And so I guess I bought into all of that sort of notion. Wanted to do something maybe a little bigger and larger than myself. So I decided I wanted to be an Air Force fighter pilot and go to the Air Force Academy. And that ended up working out to go to the Air Force Academy. But while I was there in that very intense military environment, the other side of my nature, my creative self, was looking to continue to have an outlet. And I started dabbling and continuing, I guess, to dabble in filmmaking. When I was in high school, I had played around with VHS and Super 16, Super 8 millimeter film, stop motion stuff, just as a hobby. And I think I had thought, wow, that would be really fun to do, but it seemed much more practical to go become an engineer of some sort and a pilot. And I didn't have a lot of money for college. So a service academy is if you can get in, your tuition's covered. It's essentially a subsidized education. So it was the right price, and all signs pointed toward that. Little did I know that when I entered that path, 1989, 1990, that by the time I graduated from the Air Force Academy in 1994, we would have gone through the first Gulf War and seen the collapse of the Soviet Union, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and essentially this big bad enemy of the Soviet Union that had been postured all through my youth as the reason to go be in the military, go away. Our government downsized our military in the early 90s quite a bit. And so, to go through all the pain of going to the Air Force Academy and military school, and for me, that was 5 years because I had a prep school year at another military academy to prepare for the Air Force Academy. So all of that pain and suffering should have paid off in a guaranteed pilot flying school, flight school opportunity at graduation. But because of the downsizing, they had cut those slots back to about 1/3. So it was 1/3 of all graduates medically qualified getting to go to flight school. And my grades, while they were pretty good, they weren't quite good enough to get me into flight school straight out of the academy. So I was looking for something else. And that interest in filmmaking had always been there, and I had started to find some ways to play around again with video production and filmmaking while I was at the academy. And I ended up taking one class that was offered in the English department in TV news production. And the professor was an Air Force major, and he had been in a thing called combat camera. That was his career field. And I asked him about it. And I said, well, if I was to study under you, declare no major, do independent study, would you be my advisor and help me get into that career field? And he said he would, because I had shown some talent for the filmmaking and TV making thing. And I ended up, that's what I did. Or should I say, I started when I commissioned as a second lieutenant and I graduated from the Air Force Academy. The first job I had was at a combat camera squadron in South Carolina, essentially, leading teams of combat photographers and videographers around the world documenting military operations, and just love that job. So my real filmmaking career, as a professional, as a college graduate, started with the Air Force. And I stayed on active duty for about 4 years and then transitioned into the reserves. And at that time, I went to Syracuse University in upstate New York and I guess got a proper, if you will, film and television degree up there. They have a master's program in television, radio, film there at the Newhouse School at Syracuse, and then from there jumped to New York, LA, New York, and then eventually back out to California about 15 years ago, and that was about 20 years ago. So I've been freelance in the civilian film and TV biz for about 20 years, and still serve in the Air Force Reserve now as a colonel, as a public affairs officer, but still in and around my old combat camera roots with the Air Force. So I've had two simultaneous careers going on for the last 20 years.